Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, legendary podlers. This is your lore bender, Jack, coming at you with another table talk. This week, I have our fun friend, Jimmy.
Whoa, hey-o.
What's going on,
Familiar
Jimmy?
and fun. That's me.
Yeah.
Just being familiar and fun.
I summoned familiar. He is fun.
Jimmy.
It is Jimmy.
He appears in a cloud of smoke.
Oh, yeah. I was just about to say that. And that other voice you hear is our guest for this week, Lee, who plays Mayu in the actual play podcast that we're doing.
Hello. All
How you doing, Lee?
Out there. Doing pretty good. Excited to be a part of one of these.
Nice. Well, you get to be part of a fun one because we're talking about growth, which we have done 2 sessions of. So you guys have experienced it. We missed it the first session, but you guys got a little bit of taste of it in the second and third. Basically, what growth is for all you legendary podlers, and I explained it a bit in the podcast, but I'm going to reiterate a little bit, is basically Avatar Legends' idea of experience. Every player has 4 ticks of growth before they hit an advancement, which is essentially a level up. And there are a bunch of different ways to get said growth. One of the main methods is the growth move, which happens at the end of all the sessions. All the players get to answer 3 questions, which is, did you learn something challenging, exciting, or complicated about the world? Did you stop a dangerous threat or solve a community problem? And did you guide a character towards balance? Or did you end the session at your center of your balance meter? And if you answer yes, you get a growth. And all playbooks have their own individual questions too that pertain to the narrative related to that playbook. There are a couple other ways of getting it. Some playbooks have base moves which reward growth. And there's also a basic move called resisting balance shift, which basically is when and someone's trying to call you out on something, or they're trying to shift your balance. They're trying to be like, hey, you should be more this, you should be more that, and it pertains to your balance meter. You can roll to resist it, and if you resist it, you get growth because you stood your ground, you stood by your convictions. And that's really the gist of the mechanics in regards to obtaining growth. So we'll talk about that first before we talk about what you get for the advancements. So yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on this system?
Well,
I think Lee's got some thoughts.
Yeah,
I've been informed there are some thoughts.
We've only done 2 growth talks.
Yeah.
So yeah, and looking at these questions, I think it's good for a narrative system. I think that it's a good idea. I feel like maybe it ends up happening too often, and there should be. I'm not sure how you would prevent that, though, because maybe you would have to say this many hours game time, because when we go through just an hour of playing and then get to go over these questions, and then some people have to go over 4 hours of playing and then have to answer these questions, it seems kind of off,
Yeah.
Is it off because of the frequency of which you can answer yes? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Because we are going through and some of us are checking these off really quick. And that brings me to my next point is just I feel like it's pretty easy to say that you get growth in each one. And the way that you do it is just be really good at debating and arguing for whether or not you did these things. You can simply just convince your GM that you did those things, even if it's not quite fitting. It's definitely good for a narrative system and for anyone that is prepared for those narrative challenges and using them against your DM too to get growth. But for people that are using this system as a way to step out of their comfort zone and they're not used to having to really think about those sorts of things and they're just trying to do role-playing stuff, it might be difficult for them to answer any of these questions honestly and say oh yeah, I totally did growth, or no, I didn't, or they might not argue for the things that they should argue for, or I don't know. It seems it's kind of like that game you ever play, the superhero game where you have a superhero and a superpower and you had to argue which one would beat the other one. I feel like there's no real winners in that game because you're just going to decide for yourself, just arguing with each other. And I don't think that's happened in our game very much because we all understand each other and we're being pretty mature about it. But I can see very easily where this would go very bad with a lot of groups.
The closest we've had is, I know that Lisa's had a bit of trouble answering some of the questions, but one of the,
I definitely saw that, yeah.
Yeah. One of the core tenets in Powered by the Apocalypse, let alone Avatar Legends, is that the GM is a fan of the players. So it's kind of like, the GM shouldn't be really have the mentality to try to argue about it unless it seems very unreasonable.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the game, because City of Demons is the hack that I'm making for our system or the future of our system to test it. And it's a very narrative game, and I have really extremely narrative ways to gain experience in that. And I have some players who just, boom, picked right up on it, and they're sharp as a tack, and they can say, yes, I'm checking my motivations, I'm checking off these things, and they get so much experience that it's crazy. While I have other players that are just like, they show up in a cloud of smoke and they're having a great time role playing, and even some of the things that they've chosen to tick experience, because you get a lot of choices in the City of Demons hack. Even those things that they've chosen don't happen very often because they've chosen really obscure things because they thought it was cool for their character or something, but it hardly pertains to the story that they're actually following. So it creates a really difficult balance. And as a GM, I have to be, like Jack said, a fan of the players, and I have to advocate for certain players at times because they don't keep up with it as well, or I'll throw them little nods, or even in one circumstance, because it's a system I'm working on after everyone else left, I'm like, hey, mark down 2. Just mark them down on your page. You're role playing extremely well. I just want you to have them. Just to kind of play catch up a little bit.
That might be a good system to implement too. It's just not inspiration, but basically, this things you did didn't exactly pertain to these very specific questions, but you did this and it was good and helpful to everyone. And so you could reward something like that.
Well, let's take a look at the actual questions themselves, because I think all 3 definitely ring a bit different. Did you learn something challenging, exciting, or complicated about the world? Now, this is the one that I feel is really open-ended, where the other 2 I don't feel are as open-ended, because, one is literally mechanical, which is, did you guide a character towards balance or end the session at your center? That's literally a mechanical question of, did you shift someone's balance towards their center, or did you end? And did you stop a dangerous threat or solve a community problem? That's literally the point of a session, pretty much. That's literally the point of of the story. So
this question is saying that this game, this is what it's based on.
Yeah.
It's not out. You're not supposed to be out murder hoboing. You're not supposed to be trying to upset the other players. The question is absolutely telling you this is what you need to be doing.
There's hardly a reason why did you stop a dangerous threat or solve a community problem should usually be checked. There's usually a reason why. It's very rare that you don't, unless it's just literally maybe a very narrative heavy or, communication heavy situation. Actually, I think last session, I was like, I don't know. You guys mostly just talked to the villagers. And so I didn't feel like you stopped a dangerous threat or solved a community problem. In fact, I think I said specifically that I think only Wei did in the second episode, because Wei actually helped the village. Actually, with fermenting. I don't think the rest of you guys really did anything to stop a dangerous threat or solve a community problem. You guys were finding out information. So that's when I think that question would be a no, but I would imagine it's usually a yes. But did you learn something challenging, exciting, complicated about the world? Yeah, that's open-ended, because that's really something that's kind of internal for your character, where you can pretty much that's the one that I feel like how you're talking about, the characters have to justify and argue, or at least make their point. That's the one that really comes up.
Right. It's like when you're in the Fire Nation and you go into a restroom there and you're like, oh my gosh, they have urinals. Is that new and exciting? Is it? I don't know. Is it? Maybe it is to me, but is it to Lee? Does Lee really think that that's exciting that we found that out? It's really subjective. It really is.
And one of the things is that, again, the GM's supposed to be a fan of the players. So you're supposed to be having fun. It's not really a system that's supposed to be like, oh yeah, well, I'm the GM. Watch my machinations lay out and see if you can survive. It's nothing like that at all. You're trying to tell a good story together. So usually if a player can justify it, then there should be little reason to say no. Also, this isn't like D20 or other systems that are very mechanical in regards to leveling, where, a difference between someone who's answering yes a lot of these questions versus someone who's no. And another system, that'd be a huge power difference, a huge advantage difference. In this game, no, not really. Not at all.
It's more about choices. You gain more choices.
Yeah, you get more narrative options rather than actual, the only one that really affects it is hey, you get a +1 towards your stat. But to be honest with you, the stats are so low that it really hardly matters. So that's one of the things where it's sort of like, the idea of arguing and the idea of debating really isn't that big, at least how I see it. It just
and playing other Powered by the Apocalypse games, it's fun answering these questions. And now that I've answered dozens of them because I've played several different Powered by the Apocalypse games, I just think it's a really cool way to push a story in a certain direction. That this game wants you to save the world, wants you to help your community, wants you to be friends, wants you to work as a team, and you get rewarded for doing those things, for interacting with one another in such a way. Whereas Blades in the Dark, probably my next favorite Powered by the Apocalypse game, Powered by the Apocalypse-ish game.
It was based off
Yeah, it has a ton of really cool questions that you get to answer that are tailored specifically to your class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's every time we answer those questions, it's a blast thinking back about the session. So this one does it for Avatar Legends, it does it in a little bit, I think to me, a little bit more mundane way than some of the other powered games do, because it's really small. But then again, when I get to make choices, which I think is what we're about to talk about, those choices in this feel really good when you get to spend.
Yeah. I mean,
I really like it.
A lot of these questions are mostly guides. They're guides for the players to be like, look, this is the type of journey you should be on. This is the type of experience your character should be on. Because again, we haven't really gotten into it, but there's a fourth question you're supposed to ask, which is a playbook specific question.
I like that. I do like the specifications better.
Yeah, me too. My only thing is that I find that going through them, some of them are a whole lot harder to hit than others.
Yeah, that's an inherent flaw. Like I said, with City of Demons, that's inherently a problem with being, as a storyteller or as a game master trying to play to those things because they've chosen something so different from what everyone else shows or different from the story that's happening. It's sort of up to the game master to try to weave that in or make it make sense. And it can be really challenging. It really can.
I'm going to read a couple just to give you guys some ideas. We're going to go with the destined first. The growth question is, did you spend a meaningful time with someone else focused on their concerns and troubles? That's trying to guide you towards being like the mentor, which is basically what the elder is. But it's the idea of whether or not that's not a situation you can create. That's a situation that other people have to create for you.
Yeah, you can't create it yourself. Your group has to create the situation.
Now, if we take a look at like the Foundling, for example, which is what Garrett, who plays She, does, is did you resolve an issue or conflict relying on something other than your training? Now, that right there is something that he can control. Because it's the idea of just, did you do something based on your training or not? And that he can control.
Yeah,
it's
you
pretty
can
easy
literally
you can
squeeze
it in.
Work that into almost any scene.
Now here's a weird one. The Razor. Now the Razor is someone who once was a thief or a outlaw, but now they're trying to actually make amends. So the growth question is, did you try to make amends for past mistakes or prove you're a different person now? Now, asking someone to do that almost every session, that's pretty crazy.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's very contrived.
Yeah, rather than, for example, the Foundling, where you could do that every session. That's not an issue. And Lee, I know you're the Adamant, which your growth question is, did you seek support or guidance from others? Considering the system is mostly tailored to the characters talking, I mean, like almost all the basic moves are social moves, especially for guiding and comforting. That can happen all the time.
Every scene. You could literally do that every scene. Not that you're going to get more check marks or anything.
Now, the main thing is that you are the Adamant. The Adamant is not actually supposed to be that vocal about how they feel. They're not supposed to want to get support and guidance. They're supposed to be like, I can do it on my own. I don't know. Or rather, they don't know how to express themselves. So for the playbook...
And it is
go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely one that's been more difficult than I thought it was going to be, because also it being like a narrative system and everyone trying to do their thing, it does kind of lend into that everyone trying to take the spotlight constantly sort of system, because you're trying to get those questions and you're trying to get those things checked off. And so if I'm trying to get support or guidance from someone, I'm obviously going to be trying to steer a conversation in a certain way when somebody might not want that conversation to go that way. And maybe they don't want to talk to me right now or help me. And so it's a tricky thing to balance. Now,
here's one of the key things that I think is interesting and kind of hard, I think, for someone who's, played a lot of like the more traditional tabletop role-playing games like, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, and all those things, is you're really like striving for those experience points. You're striving for those level ups. The thing with Powered by the Apocalypse is you're not really, because again, it's not that big of a thing. You're mostly just getting the satisfaction, which some people, that's a big thing. The idea of like, yeah, you should be using the questions to guide you, but they shouldn't be like, put pressure on you that you have to do this, that you have to.
But some of the questions feel like they do.
A little bit, yeah.
Like yeah, they absolutely do, especially that, like the Adamant is a great example because it's telling you to act fundamentally different than your personality that everything else on the page is telling you to do. So it's saying, hey, do all these things, but you really do well when you come out of your shell.
And that's the weird duality of the system, because it's sort of like, no, you just let things happen. If it happens, you check it off. But at the same time, you got that question there. He had asked it at the end of every session. You got your foundling player over there who answers yes every single session to their playbook question because theirs is easy to pull off. And you're sitting there like, well, I never get to answer yes on mine.
Well, it totally brings me back to what, something I think we talked about in a previous rules talk, is that a narrative game is about working together and talking about the narrative with your other players outside of the game, where a lot of the tables I've been at, it doesn't matter what game it is. Everyone at the table wants this immersion. I've had a ton of that in my life. Like, give me this immersion where we're not talking out of character. But a game like this, it behooves you to say, hey, Lee, I'm trying to get this off in the next, I don't know, a few minutes because I have this condition I'm trying to clear, this status that I'm working with.
Oh, intention.
So can I just want you guys to know that I'm going to be pushing toward that. Okay, back in character now. That way everyone knows.
It kind of takes away from like the role play focus. Like if you're breaking immersion constantly to talk out of character. It does both. For me,
it does both because it does slow the game down in that, but it also rewards you for you get better scenes because of it, more what everyone wants. Everyone gets included. From
what I've experienced with a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse stuff and stuff like this is that intention is everything. So there was a situation in our Turtles game where there was a very, very heated argument, and actions mechanics were done without the talk of the mechanics. The mechanics are still hitting, but like, for example, like someone was trying to clear angry, so they did an outburst, but they didn't say they were doing it ahead of time. So it really just like kind of just paused the moment of like, wow, that was really rude. And like, if we talked about it just like real quick ahead of time, like, hey, look, the argument's happening, be like, hey, look, I'm going to say an outburst so I can clear angry, because it makes sense and also in the moment. And it's like, okay. And then the outburst happens. It hits differently because like when you do like outbursts or like things that actually might be counterintuitive to what the group's doing or your friendships, because the mechanics kind of want you to, it's good to have like a brief, like, hey, look, this is my intention real quick. Just so that way it doesn't create any bad blood. Because again, this system kind of
rewards. And that depends on the table.
Yeah.
Because there's a ton of tables
I would agree with that.
Where that's happening the whole time, not just once in 8 sessions, but the whole time that's happening. And that's what the group wants. And they've known each other for forever. And it's never going to, that's what they want. Where when you're playing with newer players or other people you don't know, not new as in like new players, but new people to you, they don't know. Like, this person might be a real jerk in real life and it's just translating in the game, or this person may be a brilliant role player who's using the rules extremely well. And there's no preface for that. None. Mm-hmm. So it is that in a situation like that, it is. And I think in a lot of situations, I've had GMs in the past who have really wanted to play this very warmongering game. And at the table, there were players who were actually pacifists. And so there's this big disconnect when at session 0, this didn't happen just all of a sudden. It happened in session 0 when we all talked about making characters. That person didn't really,
that's the time to do it.
They didn't really make their intentions known, and the GM didn't make their intentions known. And then through the game, there were all of these moments where it just felt awkward for the whole team because we have a a warmongering barbarian. We've got this pacifist who doesn't use any damage spells whatsoever and wants to totally kind of metagame their spells. And it just, none of it went together because no one was speaking their intention out loud. So it was just this really uncomfortable mix for 8 sessions that we played this thing, or 10 sessions. It was simply because we didn't communicate out of character. We were only communicating in character, and none of us knew each other. Not in person anyway.
Yeah, I think some of the key things to talk about is, the intention of the session itself, or not the session, but the intention of the game, the theming, and just to talk real quick about what your character's going through. One thing I started doing recently with the Ninja Turtles game was I started asking the players beforehand open discussion about hey, what's your character thinking? What's your character going through right now? So that way we all had a brief idea. And it was something that we can all play off of because we all know. And that helps during the session to not have those moments where we have to, say the intentions and stuff because we already know ahead of time.
Yeah.
And those work out too.
You can do that at the beginning of the game. You can do that at the beginning of sessions. Yeah. You can do that out of game and between sessions. As long as you're making those intentions known, I don't care what game you're playing. I think you're going to have a better time.
Oh, yeah.
And you can still do that without ruining the immersion of the moment. But there are some moments that need prefacing.
Oh, yeah. And that's, to link it back around to the topic, that's where these questions sort of play off of. If, for example, Lee doesn't feel like she's getting the adamant question a lot, she could be like, okay, well, Mayu's going through something. Just let you guys know, Mayu's going through a bit of inner turmoil a little bit. I'm not going to go into it because I want you guys to find out, but just be aware of it. That way, because also it's something I actually described to one of my players recently on my Turtles game. I'm like, the thing is that, you kind of have to let the intentions be known a little bit about how your character's thinking or feeling, because while you can be vocal, but if your character's not expressing themselves, we don't, you as players don't see body language. You sometimes, depending on the role player, don't hear the inflection in the voice. You don't see the tics. You don't see the environment. You don't see the situation. You're only basing on what the person's telling you. So if someone's being, the character itself is being very candid, talking about it and being like, hey, look, my character's going through a thing. If you guys want to interact with it at all, go for it. I'll let you know if it comes up. I'll let you know what it is. Stuff like that. And again, that's where I feel like these questions come into play, though, because again, that's the thing. It's also, I'm someone who, I'll make a character, I'll roll up a character, have a pure intention of what this character is in my head, but then when I actually start playing it, they're suddenly totally different. Something just kind of naturally happens. And that's a problem I have with the playbooks in Avatar, because they're very specific. Where, for example, if I was playing the Adamant, I might accidentally end up not being the Adamant, where, I'm supposed to be, very secure in my thoughts and very, standoffish a bit and not let people in except for one person. And it's demanding. It's demanding. And those questions are supposed to help you keep in line with that. So it's quite a bit of a juggle. But yeah, so I think at this point, it might be good to go over what you get for advancements. Does that sound good?
That does sound good. I was thinking the same thing. My favorite part about advancement.
Oh, yeah. Advancements. You get a lot of different options. It's not laid out for you. So you get to do what makes sense for your character. One thing you can do is you can take a new move from your playbook. The playbooks have about 4 or 5 narrative moves each, and you can choose a new one. That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Or in situations for example, where I said, hey, I'm not really playing the Adamant as much as I thought I would. I might take actually the second choice, which is take a new move from another playbook.
Which is even cooler.
Is awesome. Because if your character is going through something, or maybe again, you're not 100% your playbook. You're a lot of different things. And if something from another playbook hits you well, if you find that you're an Adamant, but you really like giving advice, that's maybe your way of being closed in, is that rather than talking about your own stuff, you're instead giving advice. There's plenty of playbooks, from the Elder, for example, where you can actually get bonuses for giving advice. And that's really cool that you can express your character how you want and even pull from the other playbooks.
And you could end up with a character who's less the playbook you chose in the beginning and more something else.
Oh, definitely. Mm-hmm. Another option is raise a stat by 1 to a maximum of +2 in any given stat. This is nice. Bear in mind that in Avatar Legends, you can only go to +3. And the only way you can go to +3 was the help of playbook moves that say, hey, you can raise it to +3. Other than that, you can only raise it to +2. And bear in mind, you can only go to -2. Or rather, -3, depending on balance. So It's nice to have that. Like we've already had a few of our people in the podcast who are like, oh God, I have a -1 in this. I don't want a -1.
Yeah.
I steered away from negatives in City of Demons and the system we're doing because of that. Because you can make it to where the challenges are a bit higher. You can, well, with the way that I'm building the system, with a 2d6 system like this, obviously there's reasons that it's like that.
Also, real quick, I feel like the idea of a negative, like I get it. But at the same time, all it really does, I think, is create this mentality of, oh, dear God, I want to get away from that as much as possible. It's like it stops the player.
Yeah, you gotta make up for that real quick.
It stops the player from thinking like their character and instead thinking mechanically, which is something that the system is trying not to do. The system is trying to keep you thinking of your character. But with a negative, that sounds like something you want to get rid of.
It's always like the first thing. You're just like, well, I got to get this up to... you know, a certain number just to get it out of the way, or I got to get this one balanced. Yeah. And so you'll give up anything else just so you can get rid of that.
Which
first.
At the same time is sort of also
or some people.
Yeah. Which is something which is weird though, because it's sort of like, okay, but you're supposed to be a flawed character. You're a character. You're a narrative character. You do have flaws. But the system, just by the idea of having a negative, literally, it makes the gamer and a lot of people be like, no, I can't have that. Even if it makes sense for their character to have it.
Right. So if a system disguises that a little bit more so, not as a narrative, a 0, but rather as just a simple lower number, it feels different. If it's a 1 rather than a -1, and then all of the other numbers are too higher, that's a big difference, even though it's exactly the same mathematically.
Yeah, one of my favorite systems, City of Mist, which I think the podlers have been used to me talking about lately. You have weakness tags, where it's a narrative tag, something that pertains to one of your 4 themes. And when that weakness comes up, like for example, if I'm a showboat, my weakness is a showboat, and I'm doing something that actually pertains to me showing off when I really shouldn't, I'll take that -1. But my character sheet does not say -1 or anything like that. It just says the weakness tag, and it's classified as a weakness. No number attached, no nothing. And you actually get rewarded for using that weakness. That's actually how you get experience in City of Mist, is you're tackling your weaknesses. You're experiencing your weaknesses and you're working through them. And that to me feels a lot more rewarding.
We have something, or I'm working on something like that for our other setting, Cozy Core, where we're talking about different sorts of adventures and how your character will interact with those, whether or not they're stepping out of their comfort zone or not. And you'll have weaknesses, of course, for that. But then you also will get certain bonuses for taking on that challenge. So I think that's a good idea. And it's definitely playing into, it's all the psychology of not having a negative, but also having a good thing.
And that's one thing with like Powered by the Apocalypse, some of the other games, like not all the Powered by Apocalypse games do the growth questions. Some of them actually do. If you roll a miss, which is a 2 through 6, you get an experience point because you're dealing with a hardship. A complication came up and now you have to deal with it. Some people very much like that. I do. It's fun because it actually takes that whole idea of like you rolled low and it gives you a little bonus. It's like, hey, look, no, trust me, get through this. You're learning from this experience. In fact, during our Ninja Turtle game, one player very enthusiastically said, please, for the love of God, can we have Mrs. Giff experience? And where I had to retweak the amount of the questions and everything, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
It provides a mathematical way to get experience, and I've worked that into our system as well, where you have a failure, which is you roll a 1 and you miss. That's a failure. You learn from it. Once you get 3 of those, you gain an experience. Same thing with if you roll a 6, because we have a D6 system. If you roll a 6 and succeed, it's a triumph. You get 3 triumphs. It's an experience.
Which sounds great.
The players love it. They absolutely have. They thought it was the cheesiest thing, and a couple of them made huge fun of it in the beginning. And now they're like, is that a triumph? All right, that's another experience. Oh, marking it down, and they're just loving it. It's really fun. It's really easy to follow.
Yeah. So in regards to raising a stat by 1, that's really what it mostly boils down to. Is the idea is to express if your character has something a little more leaning towards their mentality based off the core stats, creativity, focus, harmony, passion. But at the same time, it sort of does get a little, it's kind of the most mechanical choice.
Hey kiddos, it's Jason, your friendly neighborhood sitter, and I want to talk to you today about Anchor by Spotify. Anchor is an all-in-one podcasting app that lets you edit and record your podcast right from your phone or computer, and then host it on your favorite podcast catching website. And the best part of all, it is absolutely free. Anchor is what we use to host Even Footing Games Presents Babies and Broadswords, and even though I've had to record this ad 15 times, what you're going to hear is the best version we have, thanks to Anchor. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. It is so easy, a baby could do it.
Though the next one, shift your center one step, is also very, very mechanical, but I think kind of speaks a little better because the whole idea of shifting your center one step is for a reminder for the podler. The center is based off of the balance meter. The balance meter is every character has a dual thing they're trying to go against or have some kind of confliction inside of them. For example, Lee's character has the adamant is restraint versus results. The concept of do they actually take time to think about what to come and to actually plan accordingly, or do they just rush in and just worry about like, hey, look, no, if I beat that guy up, I'll get the goods, rather than worrying about
you'll get results.
So doesn't matter how, you got results. And the choosing of shifting your center one step, because center's at 0, you can shift it towards one of these where where that's your way of expressing my character is naturally more towards one of these two directions. And it's cool because it does kind of, let you, again, have a way of expressing yourself through the balance bar, which can be pretty interesting. If I have a downside to it, it's just the fact that it also puts you very much closer to the fact that if you go all the way down your balance bar on one direction, you lose balance, meaning, and I'm throwing up quotations that you podlers can't see, but there's quotations being thrown up. And when you lose balance, you basically lose control of your character in some way. And the show is supposed to resemble moments like Azula going completely and utterly, haywire at the end of the series, or when Zuko at the end of season 2 betrays his uncle and betrays everything his uncle taught him to get his father's approval. You're acting extremely out of character, but in character at the same time. But again, so shifting your center means that you're shifting yourself closer to that. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, and these are bad things, so you don't want those to happen.
They're upsetting to the story, or they create moments, or they rule the scene, is what happens. So it's play with care, not necessarily it's a bad thing. It could be the most amazing part of the story, but if you're doing it all the time, it could turn into a spotlight hog or upset other people, kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so the lose your balance move specifically says, if your balance shifts past the end of the track, you lose balance. You obsess over that principle to agree that's not healthy for you or anyone around you. Choose one of the following. Give in or submit to your opposition, lose control of yourself in a destructive and harmful way, or take extreme action in line with the principle, then flee. So it's a big reaction. It's a big moment.
And your balance moment, what does that look like?
The moment of balance? Well, that's actually the next option. The moment of balance. Cool. Speaking of what Jimmy said about stealing the limelight, the moment of balance is a narrative trigger, essentially. It's something very unique to your playbook. What it basically is it's kind of like your moment to shine, where you actually, if you have the moment of balance unlocked, which you can do through advancements, you, upon reaching that narrative trigger that the playbook specifically says, you wrestle control of the narrative from the GM, and you tell what happens, how your character has their big moment. So, for example, the adamant. Your moment of balance says, you've held true to the core of your convictions, even while getting your hands dirty to do what you deemed necessary. But balance means appreciating that others are just as complex as you are, not merely obstacles or pawns. Tell the GM how you solve an intractable problem or calm a terrible conflict relating to dangerous people on a human level. Now, it's extremely specific.
Yeah.
It is extremely specific. But the idea at that point, you would wrestle control. You would actually basically be the GM. for the brief time that this happens. The GM basically doesn't even really, just as long as you don't do anything like, say like,
a bomb goes off in the Capitol building.
Yeah. Or like the big bad gives me a hug.
Unless you planted it.
The big bad gives me a hug now as I've now expressed my feelings. That's, you can ask the GM, be like, hey, can this happen? And the GM, you got to respect the GM on that one. But other than that, you wrestle control of the narrative away.
And that happens once in a game?
That's the thing with the moment of balance is you have to be at the center also. So not only do you have to hit this very specific narrative trigger, you have to be at center.
Mm-hmm.
And you can unlock this twice. So that means technically you can do it twice in a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just supposed to be like the big moments. For example, like Sokka, when he gets the sword and he has a big moment of balance because he's putting himself into this training with a sword and the master. He's taking it seriously. He's actually putting himself on the line because he's Water Nation and he's scared about the fact of how his teacher will react. But then he has a big no, I have to do this. I have to do what's right. I have to be honest with him, thus leading to the duel. That's basically a moment of balance because Sokka did something at his balance. He did something that is core to his character, is a resolution. And so basically the player could have been, describing the end of the duel or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be the moments like that, the moments where, your character shines.
Yeah.
And of course, some of these moments of balances, some of them are easier to hit than others.
I was going to say, we haven't gotten to do it yet, so I'm going to save my reservations until we actually experience something like that. But I feel like sometimes these supposed moments of balance are going to be more towards one person's personality,
absolutely,
end than the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the restraint, I feel like anything that's going to be happening for the adamant, where they're doing a big moment that's helpful to everyone, that's more restraint probably. And if I try and do anything that's just results, I have a hard time imagining a balanced moment that has any sort of results.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say? I don't know how to word this, I guess.
It becomes a very similar problem as to what we have with alignment in Dungeons and Dragons, where you're going to play it differently depending who you are. Yeah. And it's kind of fine as long as everyone's really, really on the same page about how we're all doing it or what we're going to let everyone, get away with. I hate to say let people get away with, but
wait, Jimmy, are you saying that people can agree on alignment?
At my table I play with about 50 people and I've never had anyone argue about it ever.
Wow.
Ever.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, I've seen wars.
I've heard people online, and I've had a couple of buddies, kind of question it, but they always come together with the group.
But yeah, I get what you're saying in regards to how this could be similar.
Similar, not the same, but it's a similar thing that happens.
Because, and bear in mind, you don't need moments of balance to have big moments for your character. It's not a requirement, and it's not even something that you even get that's the weird thing. Okay, I'm going to compare this to Masks. Masks is another game by Brendan Conway, the same dev who made Avatar Legends. And in that game, you have moments of truth. And I feel it's handled so much better. First off, the options are a bit more, they fit the playbooks better because the playbooks are not so defined on personality and they're defined on your origins and what your superhero is dealing with, not so much their personality. So it's more about overcoming something, again, based on their origin and their conflict. Also, you get something for doing a moment of truth. You get to lock a stat because in Masks, it's the same type of -3 to -3 to +3, but your influence, people can influence your stats based on how they see you and whether or not you accept that. But moment of truths lock one of those stats so that it cannot be budged, meaning your stat spoke to this moment of truth. And so, again, it cannot be shifted. Moment of balance doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything mechanically.
It's just a narrative reward.
It's just a narrative reward. You're at your center. Cool. Good job. And this trigger happened. Cool. Good job. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. I have fun with it. Some of the best moments I've had in Powered by the Apocalypse, Masks specifically, because again, I don't know many other systems that have this. Some of the most fun moments were moments of balances because the player got to really express what their character is going through. That's why I think I said during the podcast, I said, I always pick moment of balance or moment of truth first, just so I can have it if I need it or if it comes up. Even though, again, in Avatar Legends, it doesn't have any mechanical benefit.
I mean, I guess that's arguable because being able to control even a few seconds of a scene is pretty mechanically intense to shift the power like that. So it just depends how you look at it. And it's the same thing as it's all about perspective, how you view that mechanic, how you view it working. For a GM who's used to playing games where I'm in control of everything, handing that power over feels huge to me. Whereas for people who are used to more narrative games, it's just like, oh no, we always kind of shift the power around and talk. We all kind of make decisions together. So
yeah, I wasn't disagreeing with that really, because again, some of the best moments I've had are when players have the control. It's more the fact that, for example, the moments of truth, something happens to your character sheet to reflect that you had this big moment, this big realization. Like something happens to your character sheet to express that this thing happened to you.
Sure.
That doesn't happen with Avatar. You had this big moment. You've, achieved balance, and you had a moment associated with it. Mechanically, nothing happens to your character sheet. That's more what I was getting at.
Well, that's you check off that box that says you can't do it again.
Yeah, that's kind of it. But it's not like. But it doesn't give anything like, for example, you can shift your balance, like, or you could shift your center, which I guess would be counterintuitive, or like, or like maybe for the rest of the scene, your balance cannot be adjusted. Or something like that. No one can shift your balance. There's nothing. There's nothing in place.
Not even experience.
There's not even like a growth. So that's the part that weirds me out. Is again, Moments of Truth saw how moments like that can affect your character sheet, and which I love when your character sheet reflects what your character is going through. It's not just, oh my god, I've gotten stronger. No, it reflects what your character is going through. It reflects the changes and the ordeals that your character has gone through. I love those. That's part of the reason why I love these games. And so for Moment of Truth to not do anything weirds me out. Like, I love it. I love the concept. I love the idea of the player having control over what happens to their characters. Because, God, I mean, I'm sure some of our podlers have been in situations where it's like, oh my God, your character's having their big moment. And it seems that way. But something the GM does just didn't really bring it home all the way.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had that happen before in any game.
He's got a cheeky smile. It's hard to tell how serious he's being. Is that sarcasm? Roll to sarcasm.
He's got perfect DMs all the time.
I've only had perfect DMs that were like thinking what I was thinking.
Oh, yeah. They're psychic.
Psychic DMs.
They knew exactly what you wanted. I mean, granted, I always, even when not playing a narrative system, if I see a character's having a big moment, I always try to make sure that the player is involved as much as possible. Because it's their moment. You let them have their moment.
I don't know if you guys have ever played Champions or the Hero System. It's an older game, but man,
I played the MMO.
Well, I don't think I'm thinking the same thing.
It's a hardcore system. It's really great for being able to do whatever you want. It's one of those systems. You can make anything you want, any kind of character with any kind of power, any kind of ability, anything you can imagine. It's purchasable. There's no limitations. And that makes some really interesting groups. And you want to talk about a game where people are not on the same page. It's like the game encourages you to not be on the same page with anyone ever.
God, what's the one that starts with an R? I'm going crazy here.
Masks kind of does that too, but it does it through the playbooks. For example, like one playbook is called the Nova, where what it is you are basically like, you are the powerhouse. You are like the god tier character, power-wise. Like, you are the Superman in the Justice League. But the big thing that the playbook is all your narrative moves are about the destructive nature that you can cause if you're not in check. So the game actually goes over how to make sure that character has hit their notes while the other characters are hitting theirs. Because the thing with the Nova was that, and they say, when the Nova's in play and they roll a narrative miss, it has to be a big deal. It has to be destructive. It has to be a big deal.
Because you get to have all those really awesome moments, too.
So it gives the other characters moments to shine as well. So it's like, there are, especially with superheroes, where power levels can go crazy. They can go absolutely nuts. Someone's like, I'm going to be Superman. Someone's like, well, I'm going to be Green Arrow.
I shoot these.
But comics have shown
Well, the problem with being Superman is everyone still loves Batman more, so.
I know one person that's this huge Superman fan. It's weird to me that someone's a huge Superman fan, but Batman is way cooler. It's you? You're the Superman fan?
For me, it depends on my mood.
Yeah, I was a huge Superman fan. I like the old movies, and I watched the Lois and Clark TV show, and...
And Smallville and everything.
I did watch Smallville. I didn't really like it, though. I liked the first few seasons, and then it just dove off a cliff.
A lot of shows do that.
Yeah. Especially the CW, so.
I never really bothered with those. I watched the cartoons.
Slander.
I watched the cartoons. Anyway, get back to the point. But yeah, Masks handles that power level. Avatar, thankfully, doesn't have that, really, unless someone's trying to be a bloodbender, which, oh dear God, if someone's a bloodbender at your table, because there's always going to be someone who wants to be a bloodbender at your table. Yeah, be careful with that. And that's something where the power levels come into play. When you have someone who can literally...
Well, it all depends on what era you're playing in there. So
yeah, Jack intentionally picked the Roku era because he knew things were simple and we wouldn't have any bloodbenders.
No bloodbenders, no metal daddy.
Here's the funny thing. Everyone else picked the Roku era. I did not pick the Roku era because personally, I like the Korra era because first off, I like doing the old-timey voice, the kind of old radio announcer. I would start off every...
Oh, man.
I don't know what you mean.
I would start off every episode with giving a nice recap done in a very flamboyant and outlandish style. But, you know...
No, not Jack.
Oh, no, not me. What? A way for me to be outlandish? So
You'll figure other ways, bud. I know it.
I did not pick the Roku era. But I'm cool with the Roku era.
Who did?
No, we did. No, we came to it as a group discussion, and this was before the core book came. This was before the core book came out. I went over the eras real quick, and everyone chose the Roku era because it seemed like the most open to interpretation. Little do we know the book came out, and God, is the book even detailed for the Roku era?
It's not open for discussion.
It's very specific.
No, it's not.
It is very specific. Granted, though, when I got handed it, and I'm like, yeah, we're doing the Roku era? Cold War. Nice.
Very cool.
Anyway, so in regards to growth, do we have any final thoughts about how to obtain growth, what you can use growth for in Avatar? We already kind of went over our own takes of what, how we might change it, or what we, might do if, we were developing it versus what we are developing. So any other final thoughts?
Well, I think that when it comes to this sort of game, we're just going to have kind of the same final thought. At least I am over and over, is where this sort of game and this sort of play style requires just a lot of cooperation and honestly finding just about the most perfect group you possibly can. And that can be difficult. And I think that sometimes when looking at these rules and mechanics, even though I don't necessarily have a bad group I'm playing with, or I feel like we run into these troubles, that's always my hang-up when reading through these. It's just, this is going to go terribly wrong for this kind of person, or this is going to be bad because this is going to happen. But that doesn't necessarily make the system bad, and I think that despite the little things, that there's an attempt at balance, at least. And
I mean, it's a core mechanic, so...
Yeah, well, you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, and that's
strong.
That's a very fair point. And you can say that about any system too, about what kind of story and what kind of setting and mechanics the system is trying to say. Because I think I've reiterated that several times in the previous table talks. Is every system is trying to help you tell a different type of story. And yeah, Avatar Legends is definitely about cooperation, definitely about friendship, definitely about working through thoughts and feelings. So yeah, you definitely are.
And yeah, using those things is
you just got to be aware.
If you're not inclined to role play and go through that, then yeah, this is definitely not the system for you. Same thing, for example, like other systems where, if you want something crunchy and you're not of the crunchy mindset, then obviously you're not going to want to play a crunchy game. It definitely falls in line with that. And I think that's a very good point. Jimmy, you got any final thoughts?
I like that the experience system helps cater the game toward one type of story. What we have other games like, in Call of Cthulhu, when you use a skill repeatedly, it's going to increase that skill. That's what the system wants you to do. It wants you to practice your skills so that you can get better at them. And then if you do that as a group, I practice working in a library, you practice working with guns, and you practice reading ancient texts or whatever the case may be, or researching or talking to people. We'll each get good at something very specific and rise as a team. And then in something like Dungeons and Dragons, the more monsters you slay, the game rewards you because the game wants you to slay monsters. And, in this, it's all about coming to the table with a specific type of story. Avatar, The Last Airbender, Korra, these type of ideologies in mind. We're going to make that type of game, and this experience system supports that heavily, which is really cool. It makes for problems, which, as Lee said, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's why I hesitated and let Lee go first, because I knew that we would have some crossover, and I had like 10 things. I have 10 things I wanted to say. So I agree wholeheartedly that in a narrative system, if we agree that we're going to tell a specific type of story, it's nice that the system helps us do that. And it would be nice if we can work together in order to do so. So I really like it. It has helped me shape the way I view games. I give it 2 thumbs up for the way that it works. Just know that there are problems there. Know that there are weird things that you're going to have to work through, just like any other system.
For my thoughts, overall, the way the growth is delivered for the story it's trying to tell, I'm in a complete agreement that it's good for what it's trying to do and the story it's trying to tell. It's good. I can say, as someone who tried to take the system out of Avatar, be very careful.
Bad. You will have to change the way growth works. That's and it's fine. Okay. I even like that if we're playing that if you're familiar with other types of growth questions from other games or other Powered by the Apocalypse type games, especially, you can craft your own as a group to help tell the type of story you want to tell. And that, I don't think that that's unfathomable
not
at all. I think it's, in fact, if you like to do those type of things with the games you play, where you get in and tweak the rules, it can only help. And this is a great place where you could homebrew as a group during session 0 to get the game you want. And that's super cool too.
And that's one of the key things is that, again, I'm one of the biggest advocates towards Powered by the Apocalypse, but I also understand the fact that, you have no idea? Oh.
Did you know Jack liked Powered by the Apocalypse games?
I just don't know him that well.
Oh, yeah.
I've never heard him say PBTA.
Never. But the thing that I also realized, and this is the way this growth works, and this is one of the purest examples, is, it's okay. Thing with I'm going to say Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, and all those guys, is you can tailor make the experience a bit.
The cursed words.
No, I'm actually... The
cursed words. I don't think I've ever heard you say Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, the system is these...
Nothing favorable is coming.
Let's let there be a hush, as I'm going to speak favorably. Is that the thing about those systems is, yes, the system is designed resource-wise and, spell slots and stuff like that to basically be dungeon crawling. But it gives you the tools to put things in between. You don't even need dungeon crawling. You could be about maybe having a fight every few sessions and just do storytelling. Granted, again, you're not using 95% of your character sheet, but it gives you those options. And that's something that I think a lot of people go back to D&D for, is because, again, you can craft it a lot to kind of mold what you're doing. It may not do it the best, but it does it in a way that is enjoyable. Thing with Avatar Legends and some of the other Powered by the Apocalypse games is, no, you're telling something very specific. You're doing a specific story.
Less moldable.
It's less moldable. Granted, if you know a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse systems, you find it. You can mold it only because you can interchange things from different games. But you kind of need that. While, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, and all those guys, just as long as you have a basic understanding of the rule set, you can kind of just make it whatever you want. You don't want flanking rules? Who cares? You don't like EXP on monsters? Milestones. You can mold it. This system, and again, the growth is one of the key things, is they're just a bunch of questions, but they say so much about the system and the story that they want you to tell. It's almost the core of it. And it's hard to pull away from that without affecting everything else.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. So that's my basic, I wouldn't say basic, but my thoughts on it. And yes, there's praise for D20 there. I don't hate D20. I don't. I just like narrative games. But I also know that there's problems, such as this.
I think of them as speed bumps rather than problems.
Speed bumps. It's problems if you want... Challenges. It's problems if you like the mechanics, but you want to take them outside of their setting. That's where it's a problem. Maybe
it's a bigger hill to climb.
Maybe your group likes the combat mechanics, which should be next week. It should be next week. I swear.
I thought we were doing combat. I don't know why I brought my combat sheet with me. I was ready to talk combat. I looked over everything. I was like, man, I know combat.
I fully expected combat to happen last session during the AP. It did not happen. Oh, it's happening. It's happening.
Sorry.
It's happening next time, though. Oh, you guys, unless you run for the hills, you're not avoiding it this time.
No, too bad. I'm burning my
How can I
combat
mess
sheet.
it up again?
I'm going to burn my cheat
Next
sheet.
week.
I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to freeform it next week.
But no, combat should happen. But like I was saying, if you want like the combat system from Avatar and you like that, and you kind of like maybe like a few things from Avatar, but you want to pull it out of setting and stuff, you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems. You can do it. It's just not going to be easy.
You're going to have to tell a martial arts style game. 100%. It's a martial arts. We'll get to that next
Very
week.
martial arts, teenage,
Yeah.
emotional
What about
game.
You could play maybe. No, I don't know. You could play Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, you could do that. Or Korra.
Oh, Korra. Because it's funny though. It's funny though because if you do take a look at some of the core things from this game, it's definitely more geared towards Avatar: The Last Airbender and not Korra. Because Korra had different theming. And Korra, like her gang, was not even together for like 2 seasons. Like they were like in totally different locations doing totally different things. But yeah, that's a totally different type of story, which, I mean, you could do Korra camp sessions. I've done Korra sessions. They're fun. I like Korra. I like the Korra setting. It works only if you still pertain to the idea of what the story's trying to tell. And again, the growth is kind of part of the key thing to help guide you for that. Both the players and the GM. Or lore bender. Because
Lore bender.
Anyway, but I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you all, Legendary Podlers, for queuing in with us again. Again, combat next week. It will happen.
I'm gonna do a hit. I'm gonna punch a thing.
Some fire is going to be thrown. Some water is going to be thrown. Earth. Actually, we don't have an earthbender. We don't have an airbender either. So yeah, fire and water is going to be thrown around.
No fire.
No fire.
Maybe from the firebenders, but not from me.
So I very much hope you guys look forward to that and looking forward to our discussion about it because, oh, believe me, there is a lot to discuss. It's going to be a fun talk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big martial arts guy. It's going to be a fun talk. I'm Jack. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for listening, everyone. It's Lee Baldwin.
And I'm Jimmy. I'm Jim. I'm not playing, but
We miss you. We miss you. We miss you, bud. I want to see your firebender come out with a big mustache and start going on about being a Southern Fire Nation gentleman. I'm just a humble firebender from the Southern Isles.
Maybe an NPC sometime.
I might do it. But anyway,
what we have here is a failure to communicate among Fire Nation.
Exactly. That's my best friend. All right.
so thank you all, Legendary Podlers, for joining us for this evening. Evening, morning, afternoon, sun shining, moon up high, doesn't matter. You joined us. Hopefully you had fun. See y'all next time.
I'll tell you what, we sure are happy you did.
We really are. On behalf of Even Footing Games, thank you all for joining us.